My name is Nate. I am soil guy. There's more. Hang on. Dirt good.
Weed not good.
Depending on which one we're talking about.
All right, welcome back to the Dirt Kings Podcast. This week we're going to be talking about microbial activity. Seems to be a very popular topic these days, but one that, at least from what I've come across, there tend to be a lot of questions about. So I'm going to hopefully answer some of those questions, explain a little bit about exactly what microbial activity is, both in the soil and in the plant, and why it's important. And to help me do that this week, we've got Miller Saunders here with me. Very good agronomist and been with us for a long time. Jonathan Barrett as well, you've seen him before, and Tim Cook, who has done a lot around microbial bacteria work and microbial activity as well. So, in that note, what's up, boys?
What's going on? What's on, man?
We gotta pretend like we haven't been sitting here for the past 45 minutes talking crap.
I ran out of good jokes. I already told them all.
I don't think you told me to do it. No, never. And then now when you showed up,
I cut some jokes. Eventually something will land.
You're like a machine gun when it comes to jokes. First one's freaking jam.
And he runs out quick.
Oh, man.
Very true.
Miller immediately got nervous. He's like, cameras are rolling.
Jokes? You've heard of that before.
Yeah, come on. Gotta sit proper. Put my hands, sit up straight. I don't know what to do with my hands.
Why am I so weird on camera?
I was talking a couple weeks ago with Rob about some like microbial, like trying to make assimilations between like microbial life and like real world topics in terms of like, am I sweating? It's hot in here. That's what was going on. But assimilations between like real world and how like the symbiosis works between like the plant and the soil. And I thought that'd be kind of an important topic to consider, and almost kind of like relay that into soil conversion, which I feel like is like a very new like idea and topic as well, but one that all of us have had experience with, not only understanding but like actually doing it. You've had a few different guys that you worked with on kind of converting the soil. Brad Hamill. He was a big one.
Minnesota.
Minnesota. You done any soil conversion?
Absolutely.
What are you converting? Okay.
I had to throw that out.
That's like a uppercase one.
Absolutely. What do you mean? Just using
like taking poor soil, like
yeah,
real sandy, beat down, hardly any nutrient availability soil, and over the course of 3 to 4 years, converting into really rich dark dirt.
Yeah,
which like this would be a great time to throw up a picture of like Rich's ground, because that's a good example
comparison.
Yeah. And that was only like 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Apart, and it was like real light, not very good dirt, and then same exact dirt a couple years later. So
that conversion was kind of pretty crazy because that's an anhydrous neighborhood where everybody knifes in anhydrous in the fall, and they step in, and that was the first time I ever seen our liquid calcium actually move slow, because we talked about it moving real fast, and we went up there and started digging around, and that soil was about as dead as it can get.
Yeah.
So 2 years turnaround there was actually pretty impressive. Lots of
everybody else's microbes just run to his place. Like, this is the only place we can survive.
I mean, that's the thing with modern day farming is every input that you're doing, whether it's synthetic fertilizing or even from cultivating, everything you're doing out there is slowly killing your soil health and soil life.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing, because like you can't stop using herbicide, you can't stop using any of these things. Especially like on year one, I feel like that's something I come across a lot with like guys that try to go no-till. Is they like last a year or two, and then they're like, oh man, it was killing our productivity, and it's because like it takes 3 to 4 years for that
I mean,
organic matter breakdown to catch up.
Some studies say like 7 to 10 years. I mean, when we talk about microbial activity, microbial health, And you say it's kind of a hot button topic. I mean, in reality, what we're talking about is regenerative ag. I mean, everyone that hasn't lived under a rock for the last 5 to 8 years knows that regenerative ag is getting huge in the agriculture industry. And at the basis of that is basically soil health, microbial activity. I mean, everything that you're doing in a no-till process is to promote a symbiotic relationship between your plants and the soil, and reduce commercial input as far as that's concerned. I mean, it's the same thing kind of like we were talking about just a second ago, where you have to use herbicides, you have to use pesticides, but that is a direct result of the inputs that we've been using for so many years, the caustic material that we've been putting in the ground. A healthy plant can fight off most pests and can fight off most fungi by itself. That's just something that's come from the practices that we've been using for the last 40, 50,
and that's
60
why
years.
like whenever you say like the 7 to 10 year thing, like that's almost kind of taking a hard route in terms of like
Not eating it.
what.
Yeah.
Not aiding.
Oh, aiding. I think you
Yeah.
said eating it. I was like, it would be Johnny out there eating dirt. It's dirt, man.
I'm pretty sure the only one that's getting out.
Soil conversion. Yes, I did eat dirt on one of our TikToks. So
Just look at low pH.
that's a pretty good quote. It's the end of my work, I see.
But no, eating it.
Yeah, aiding it, like
Yeah.
speeding up that process, because like if you're just doing like cover cropping and like crop rotation, I feel like a couple pieces of the puzzle. It's like having like inventing the wheel, but then not inventing the engine to drive the wheel. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like you got the ball rolling, but you didn't really speed it up at all.
Trying to use square tires.
Not quite. It's not like something you would do though.
It's like Rich's dirt, man. Your jokes could just need a little bit of attention. They're almost there. They're almost there.
What you asked.
But before we get into all the soil conversion stuff, I think it's good to go like back to the basics of what I like to call like the economy of the soil. And economy is like an exchange of goods, services for payment, right?
Mhm.
Which I feel like is a pretty good assimilation to like what's going on between the plant and the soil, right? And more specifically, like the bacteria in the ground. And so I kind of want to like start with that and then talk about like aiding it, like you mentioned that, and like speeding up that either a soil conversion process or just soil management and soil health process to increase like nutrient availability and such, like how you can do that, right?
Yeah.
First things first, of course, you've got this relationship, this natural relationship between plants and microbial activity, which is like an exchange relationship, right? I'll do this for you if you do that for me, right? And really what it is plants going, hey, I'm going to capture carbon out of the atmosphere and I'm going to use photosynthesis to create energy and to create glucose. And then I'm going to take that energy and I'm going to deposit my excess into the soil. And then the microbes use that as food to reproduce and to function. And so like that's, step one. And so what the microbe does, and that's kind of what I like to call like the currency, right? That's the payment to the microbes. As you pay that microbial life, you increase the amount of workers you have in the ground, the microbes you have in the ground, that then work to create a healthier growing environment. And so like the number one thing they're doing, of course, is mineralization of nutrients in the ground to help keep nutrients available, to help move nutrients through the ground so that the plant can take them in. But then, there's so many other factors as far as improving soil structure, breaking down organic matter, etc. And so with that being said, like one of the things that I find really interesting, and this is kind of the assimilation I was making with like the real world, or this economy, so to speak. The amount of workers you have is directly impacted by the amount of money you have in paid workers, right? And so increasing the plant's ability to deposit more exudates into the soil increases the amount of microbial life you can have in the ground, right? Primary way of doing that is coming in and speeding up the process in the plant to increase the plant's carbon capturing potential. For us, we use things like BIO-ACT and FOLIAR-ACT to stimulate, FOLIAR-ACT specifically to stimulate the plant, right? And we use a product like BIO-ACT to stimulate the soil. They're both kind of doing the same thing. You're either bypassing the plant saying, I'm going to go straight in and like increase the amount of currency in this economy so that there's more workers. And by doing so, you're bringing up those microbial populations, which stimulates plant growth, or you're stimulating plant growth, which stimulates and energy levels in the plant, which stimulates root exudates, which increases microbial population. I mean, are you guys on the same page with me? And
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, to stick to that same type of economic exchange there's really only two ways to grow plants, and that's, the God intended way of a natural atmosphere and ecosystem like you would see with prairie grass or any forest or anything out there that's not being cultivated. And then we have a commercial way, and not to say that the commercial way is bad, but when you can bring a little bit more of that natural way into play with the commercial way, that's when you really get the most bang for your buck.
And I like that a lot because I feel like so many people, it's one or the other, right? You're either into regenerative ag or you use conventional synthetic fertilizers, and
Nobody wants to combine them.
Yeah, but that's to me, I feel like that means everybody's missing the point, because my perception is synthetic fertilizers or herbicides or any of these things, they make the plant less dependent on microbes, which means that it's not as necessary to have those root exudates into the soil, that currency into the economy, because they've already got what they need.
Yeah.
And then in turn, we have things that we use and we're going to keep using that also negatively impact those populations. But then, you have people who are like, well, don't use any of that. And I feel like that's
organic. I mean, the thing is the microbial and soil health is just going to enrich the effectiveness of your conventional program. And the thing is with plants, and I might not be exactly correct on this, but most plant roots, especially cropped plants, only reach about 4 to 7% of the soil, right? Yeah. And so the only two ways that you can get nutrients to that plant is one, commercial inputs, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium over the top or knifed in or however you implement that, or two, like he was talking about through that exchange process.
4 to 7%?
Yeah, 4 to 7%. That's all they reach. And you have older pathways of roots that they can get down into and expand a little bit further. But when you're talking about 4 to 7% of anything, right? If you're at a buffet or if you're at a bank or whatever, you take those numbers at 4 to 7%, that's very little. And like I was saying, the only two main ways you can really implement growth out of that is either a commercial input or through that economic process he was talking about. One being bacteria. And if we're talking about similes and metaphors to how that would work, I like to think of bacteria as a libertarian, right, outlook. That bacteria stays close into the plant, right? It's on the outside of the plant, and it can only take nutrients from a very short diameter around the plant roots. And then you have the fungi, and the fungi is more like the transportation. It actually forms inside of the plant root, stretches out into those micro layers of soil where the water and nutrients are, and then it uses that as a nutrient highway to get to the bacteria, which the bacteria takes the glucose, the sugar that the plant's outputting, that exchange, converts it into energy to eat down those nutrients and put them back into a form.
And that's one thing too, I feel like is looked over a bunch, is the relationship between bacteria and fungi in the soil and the balance that you're looking for between those two things. Because even for the first few years that I was really getting into regenerative ag and understanding microbial life, I didn't even understand how much fungus played a part in it.
Yeah.
And then I started reading, different things like mycelium running and that kind of thing, where it was it's talking about basically, like you said, this network of exchange in the ground. And oh man, I thought that was super fascinating.
If you look at, like I said, if you look at the bacteria as a libertarian view, you look at the fungi as the feds. They're long. They got a long arm. They reach out there and they oppress, your more unhealthy things that the plant.
Feds are IRA.
The plant
come for your taxes.
They oppress the pathogenic type of stuff that's in the soil that's going to cause plant disease, root disease, stuff like that.
And there's a lot of things that even you can't replace, even with conventional methods, that your microbial bacteria play a huge factor in. I mean, they transport water, fertilizer, nutrient breakdown, and then you also have oxygen.
And I feel like fertilizer is such a
broad term.
Well, yeah, it's kind of broad because fertilizers is a term we use for plant food, but really we're talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, calcium.
Which your soil is made of.
Right, which the soil is, your soil's made out of macronutrients.
Yeah.
Maybe not nitrogen. Nitrogen's an energy source that, but that you can supply additional nitrogen.
Well, especially phosphorus and potassium. Your soil, a large percentage. When I say large, it's actually only 1 to 3%. But when you're talking about a square hectare of land, that's a lot of phosphorus and potassium under your feet there that you're
even just microbial bacteria that transport water from lower depths. I mean, that's a huge aspect.
I mean,
there's no way to do that.
Right.
And there's
on your own.
There's a lot of roles that it plays. I mean, you have the the turning over nutrients, nutrient cycling, but you also have soil building, retention. The more organic matter that you create in your soil, the more soil water retention and nutrient retention you're going to have. And so there's many roles that those microbes and bacteria and fungi are playing for you.
The way I always understood is there's like 5 types of soil decomposers, right? You had like organic matter decomposers, then you have your alkaline decomposers, your acidic decomposers, which basically each of these are releasing different things, right? And so organic matter decomposers are breaking down organic matter, and that can release nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, as well as your macros. Your others are working to mineralize actual soil to release calcium, magnesium, potassium, increase phosphorus levels, phosphorus cycling in the ground, which like phosphorus is very immobile nutrient. So the more you can increase mineralization of soil around the root zone through stimulation of microbial activity right in that area, I feel like the more you get out of natural phosphorus you have in the ground, because like you said 1 to 3% soil is made up of potassium, which doesn't sound like a lot, but then if you do the math on that, it comes out to tens of thousands of pounds.
That's like 61,000 pounds of phosphorus per acre.
Yeah.
The trick to that is that soluble or not? And that's sort of
which the majority isn't. That's what your soil test is looking at is what nutrients are actually available that aren't tied up with part of soil mineral.
Mm-hmm. But even to be able to reach those, once you do have the process of nutrient breakdown and conversion, even just being able to reach those, plants root zone on most plants is what would you say about that?
I guess it depends a lot on the plant.
Depends on the plant,
but it's not much.
Those roots can't reach that water bottle, if it's needing it, and let's say those are the nutrients. It can't reach out any farther. It has to have things that can reach out and take it to where it needs.
It's kind of like when you pull a plant root and you see those fibrous roots on the outside of the main driver roots. Those are technically fungi. That's a fungi that grows inside the plant. It reaches out through the soil and creates that nutrient highway. And then another thing too is kind of like
very quiet guy right now. First time in life. I'm learning all those.
And kind of, going back to what you're talking about with reaching it, we talked about all this stuff that, that bacteria and fungi can do for turning over nutrients, but also breaking down soil. When you have years of cultivation, you build up things like plate soil, hard pan. You have the plow line, which is a depth of where, that you plowed over and over and over again. And directly below that plow line is usually where a lot of your main source of natural nutrients is sitting. And by breaking down that organic matter and continually turning it over, it softens that soil, allowing your plants to reach down further. And if you can get those root systems down every year, they'll follow that same line. So the year before and the year before and the year before, those root systems start to build a pathway down, which makes it easier for your plant, less stress for your plant to get down there. And then they start to pop out those fibrous roots, and you're getting way more input from a natural source there.
Great fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
I still have some ground where it's conventional. Does that mess that process up?
Yeah, it does, because like I said, you have something what's called the plow line, and that plow line is what you're doing is you're turning over that topsoil, and every time you turn that topsoil, it creates a hard pan underneath it, because that plow is scraping on the bottom, it's turning that topsoil, and it's packing in what's underneath it, and it's also pushing down a lot of your nutrient deposit below that. And the name of the game is to break through that plow line. If you can soften that plow line, which you have to plow a lot of times, just depending on the situation of the dirt, but if you can break through that plow line, what you'll get is naturally you'll have funnels in that soil, and all the nutrients will, what they call nutrient leaching. They'll start to leach through that plow line and then settle down below it, or leach out into natural, sources of water and stuff like that, which is another big thing that microbial activity and soil health helps with, is it cuts down on nutrient leaching. Because when you have, say, organic matter decomposer, you take that breaks down your nitrogen into nitrates and then back into ammonia, which releases into a gas into the atmosphere, which cuts down on nutrient leaching. Because and that's really the beautiful thing in my mind about microbes is they have natural shutoff switches. They know what the plant needs and when it needs. Those fungi,
and they naturally are trying to balance.
Yeah, there's signal to it, and they say, hey, we have enough of this for right now. Let's convert that into something that gets it out of here. and we need more of this. And that's kind of the role that the fungi plays. It's the signal.
Communication.
Yeah, it's saying, hey, we need that, we need this, we need that, we need this. And the bacteria is breaking that down and saying it to the plant.
And so, like, with, like, a biostimulant, right? Because you got a lot of different types of, like, biologicals these days. You got live bugs. And, you know, I feel like live bugs are great. There's some good companies out there that do that. But, I don't know, I just feel like you're not changing the environment, right? You're increasing the population artificially. But my mindset is, well, if you're going to bring more workers in, you first have to have, one, the environment to sustain those workers. To the economy to support the livelihood of those workers, right?
Food, basically.
Right. And so kind of our approach has always been, hey, let's start with the economy. Let's increase the economic capability of the plant and the soil by artificially putting in same exudates. So that way we're going, hey, giving you everything you need to increase population. Which the nice thing about bacteria, it can increase populations quite quickly. Can increase those microbial populations quite a bit, which then increase nutrient availability in the ground, nutrient motility, water retention and water penetration, you know, all these different things. But you're starting at, hey, instead of bringing in a bunch of workers and then going, okay, now they'll stimulate the plant enough to keep up with it. I feel like you lose a lot of that potential versus coming in and saying, hey, let's increase the economy first. Now, I have also seen, you know, where it's like, hey, take the two and marry it, where it's like, hey, put on a, you know, biological stimulant along with a probiotic, you know, living organism, put them in at the same time. I've seen that work pretty well.
Well, there's different companies that you can actually send your soil and they'll figure out what strains of microbes you have.
Yeah, there's quite a few now. In fact, doesn't Midwest do that now?
And Taylor.
I was told they did, but it was a
soil
special
health
thing.
test.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
a
it's
special
like a
thing.
soil test.
And they go
Yeah,
very
soil
into
test.
depth. I mean, it takes a little bit of knowledge to be able to read those things. If you have a good agronomist, you can definitely send that over. But when you're looking at those soil health tests, they tell you a lot about what's happening in your soil. And
Well, then you just tend to be a lot more, not just with the soil health test. Like there's different ones where they'll tailor bugs to what you already have.
Yeah, like the one I told you about.
The one we ran up on in Kansas.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy yesterday with
Organic.
that. The issue with that,
they're pretty
you know,
cool.
there's a lot more time and money goes into that aspect versus just adding in the prebiotic. It seems like a lot easier, more effective method.
Right.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at too. I mean, because with the probiotics, there's two reasons, and like they have their place in this industry for sure. But there's two reasons I don't really deal with probiotics that much. One is it's just hard to keep them alive. Their shelf life is not good. Heat affects them, cold affects them negatively. So you have to put them in exactly in the soil when it's that right time, when the soil temperature and the moisture level will keep them alive. Mm-hmm. And then two is, if you look at it on a scale basis, you cannot add enough of anything that's even going to match what should be in the soil, right? Because if you look at a square, like I said, a square acre, if you had a square acre of healthy soil, there's more bacteria in there than there is stars in the sky. And you can't do that same thing with a quart or even a gallon or 50 gallons of probiotic, you know? Right. It can help it along for sure.
And that's the other thing too, is like, so there's a direct relationship between the amount of root exudate and the ability for healthy bacteria in the soil to outcompete negative bacteria in the soil. I've seen a lot of positive benefit from the application of things like BIO-ACT in decreasing the need for fungicides. You know, a lot of those funguses are, you know, negative bacteria that's affecting the plant and causing problems. And if you're kind of setting your plant up right from the start, but we're also applying that directly to the soil so that we're increasing microbial population. There's a lot of research out there showing, like, you know, the more you increase your microbial levels in the soil, positive microbes, the less likely you are to deal with fungal problems, with disease, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we have that one study in which I don't deal with it a lot where I work in the Midwest with the BIO-ACT and products similar to it, reducing Fusarium colonization by like 75-80% around the roots of corn, you know.
You know, Fusarium colonization is kind of a term that's hard for a lot of people to really understand. More direct term for it is Fusarium and rot. Because
do you think those two things are easier to understand?
Oh no, for real. If you try and look up Fusarium colonization, nothing pops up. But if you look up Fusarium and rot and corn, you actually find stuff. Because I tried for years to find it. But
well, like Fusarium is a good example of that.
Yeah, and it's corn cob rot essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, fighting it with positive bacteria is pretty much
Red root rot is the same thing.
Yeah.
You get that a lot on the East Coast, where you'll have a whole corn stalks just lay over the whole field because the stalk gets too weak.
What's it in tomatoes? I forget. Blossom end rot.
Yeah,
and tomatoes as well. So really, most
Seen a lot of problems we've been addressing. Like last year, it was a lot of like black tar spot.
yeah. There's a lot of that.
Midwest, a bunch. That comes, I feel like, from just like these weird weather patterns of like extreme moisture and extreme dry. And it creates kind of a positive environment for breeding of negative bacteria and such.
he got this water bottle. He's just like. Let that happen.
I mean, it's the same
You're sitting here like a kid in class.
I get awkward on camera.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing even for, you have fungicides and disease and stuff like that, but even for pests. I mean, in India, I know I just was reading a big study about how they were taking natural reservoirs and natural, growth sites of different plants versus commercially farmed sites. And they had a really bad locust outbreak in India this year, and the locusts were by far attacking the commercial grown crops over the natural farm crops. Because the soil health and microbial life in the natural areas were much better. And it's just like anything in life, lions or anything, they attack the weak. Any predator of anything, which you can call, a fungicide or fungus a predator, you can call a grasshopper a predator. Any predator will always go towards the weaker of whatever's around. And when you have plants that are stressed from heat or drought or herbicides or inputs of nitrogen, they're weak. And if you don't have that microbial life and soil health to kind of combat that, that's when you have to start to get into a lot of more of the fungicides, pesticides, and things like that.
Was it you that was telling me about somebody using increased microbial levels and microbial activity to melt snow? That was you?
Yeah.
I was actually reading into that the other day. You increase your microbial activity, you can increase soil tension.
I forget which strain of microbes it is, but they come out of dormancy earlier than the rest. Most, as you guys know,
It's
about 60.
decomposers, right?
I think so.
They're most tolerant to the cold.
Yeah, most come out at 60 degrees. They come out at about 40 degrees. And he actually grows his own microbes. He does a probiotic, but I mean, microbiologist,
still
genius.
Yeah.
He gets it to the point where, he'll melt the snow about 3 weeks earlier than everybody else.
Man, I don't know a lot about that, but that sounds like it'd be huge for seed germination and population as well. That's
creating a warm soil environment early in the spring.
Yeah. You get
That's
a
why
3-week
I feel
jump in 3 weeks.
BIO-ACT is really good for increasing germination rates, but I feel like that has a lot to do with it. It's like you're kind of creating an incubation, in the ground.
Well, and he puts his through a pivot system. Fascinating stuff.
If you think about it, it makes a lot of sense with BIO-ACT because it increases your organic matter decomposers, which anytime you're decomposing organic matter, what you're creating is humus. And humus has a ton of that living in it, and that's going to create soil temperature rises. It's going to, like we talked about, retention and stuff like that. But I feel like one thing, we've talked a lot about what they do in the soil, but there's actually a lot of topside advantages to it as well. I mean, if you talk about stalk breakdown for corn growth, and don't quote me on this one, but I think it's like out of 250 bushel corn crop, if you break down those stalks correctly, you can get like 75 pounds of phosphorus back, like 60 something pounds of potassium out of it, and a good amount of nitrogen out of it as well.
I wouldn't doubt that whatsoever.
And that's a big part of that. People have tried many methods throughout the decades of breaking.
I'm sure you're
down
getting a lot of micronutrients as well out of it, and a lot of positive.
Oh yeah, I mean, like your biggest source of available nutrients, I feel like, other than synthetic inputs, is
residue breakdown.
Residue breakdown, and not even just like what you see on top, but like roots in the ground, and all that. Oh, and I mean, I guess you could even argue, dead bugs. Like the more you increase your population, they're breaking down soil and consuming those nutrients, right? And then as that population dies and is turned over,
one of the biggest, contributing factors is vertebrates, right? Earthworms, things, bugs, you know what I mean? And you have unhealthy soil, you can dig as deep as you want, and you're not going to find very many earthworms or bugs like that, without healthy soil. They don't want to live in it. There's no food for them in there. nothing's turning over for them, and they're a big factor of what breaks down. I'm sure everyone's grandma had one of those bathtubs sitting outside their house with the earthworm farm in it, for compost and stuff like that.
What?
And that's,
But your grandma killing people? You guys didn't have a lime farm. Break down the body in 2 weeks.
the old cast iron bathtub with dirt in it. throw your trash out there. Full earth.
We do composting, but it's nuts how much.
I do a bit of composting too. A little bit of BIO-ACT out there. That's it.
Yeah, composting is interesting. Early on, you can't go digging through that. It's crazy the amount of bugs you find in there. It's nuts. You can start at like the microbial level. The rest kind of tends to follow suit. As far as like earthworms coming back in, and earthworms are just one of the easiest things for us to see with our naked eye, but there's so many other things that start to get back in the ground that really help turn the soil. And that's one thing too that, like, in our next part, we'll go a little bit more in depth into kind of the science behind it, actual soil conversion as well. All right, so with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. We're doing something special this week. We mentioned a little bit about BIO-ACT and FOLIAR-ACT, which are 2 prebiotics we have that are specifically designed to increase microbial population. They're 2 of the products that we use in soil conversion and to help improve soil health. We're going to be talking more about them next week as well. 2 lucky people, we are going to be giving away enough BIO-ACT and enough FOLIAR-ACT for 20 acres of each. In order to qualify, please like this video. You have to be subscribed to our channel and leave a comment. 2 people will be lucky winners. And don't forget to share as well. That's an important part of qualifying to receive one of those trial buckets. So with that being said, we will see you here next week for part 2 of this video.